last year I spoke about basic electricity, and I used to be an electrician, and the AV and everything went down, and I didn't have any power, and I didn't have any slides, and so I started just working off of memory, trying to make it through the rest of the class, and I kind of reverted to lessons learned and stuff, just to make it through the rest of the class and try to add some value for the folks that showed up, even though we lost AV and all that stuff. And so I thought, when they asked me if I wanted to come back and speak again this year, I said I do, but I want to change my topic. I said I really don't want to talk about basic electricity. I want to talk about all the things that happen whenever estimators and designers misunderstand each other. Would you be all right with that topic? And they said, yeah, that sounds like a fantastic topic. What are you going to teach? I said, well, I'm going to teach everybody all the things that I've messed up on. So that's kind of what this is. So my name's Preston Moore. I work for Nabholz Construction. I've been in the Kansas City area for almost 20 years. The first part of my career was in the electrical industry, so I'm a master electrician. At about the 10-year mark, I kind of got bored with my career and decided that I wanted to reinvent myself somewhat, and decided I wanted to go to the general contracting side. So I ended up getting on board with Nabholz Construction actually as a service electrician. So previously in my old career, I had become a project manager and an estimator, and I focused on a lot of design and build work, which is where I met the guys at Metro Air over there doing design and build work. I can't get rid of them. They're here to see me today. But anyway, I took a little bit of a step back in my career because I was having a hard time transitioning from an electrical contractor to a general contractor. So I put the tool belt back on for a while and went and ran some service and kind of transitioned into an assistant superintendent type role, and then I moved into estimating. There was a guy at our office at Nabholz, and I was asking him one day what he did. He said, well, I work in pre-construction. And I said, well, what's pre-construction? And he said, well, we help the architects and engineers stay within budget even before the design's done. He said they haven't had a chance to talk to the owner and fully understand what they want. And the owner really doesn't know what they want yet either, because they need input from the architects and engineers, and there's just this big question mark out there on how do we change the design but stay within the budget. He said that's what I do in pre-con, is I help everybody stay in budget. And I said, well, that actually sounds really cool. That sounds like something that I'd like to do. And so I told him about my background in design build, and he said, so if I give you a set of drawings and it's just a floor plan, you can come up with the electrical system. I said, absolutely. And he goes, okay, you're working for me now. So it was kind of that simple. Just had to have a conversation around the coffee pot with one of my coworkers. But anyway, enough about me. I want to know who else is in the room because I may have to tailor some of my comments. Any architects? After I said that, no architect's going to raise their hand, are they? I see subcontractors, HVAC, electrical. I see J.E. Dunn folks. So I've got a slide full of my mistakes that you all are here in the room to hear, so I'm glad my boss isn't here. Let's see, so subs, other contractors, end users. We got any developers or any building owners in here? You? Okay, all right, good. Well, I thought, I debated on whether to do this, but I really felt like I needed to tell a bad estimating joke, because there's not a whole lot of estimating jokes out there, and the ones that I did find were bad, and I was like, well, let's just go ahead and tell that. So, a superintendent, project manager, and an estimator go deer hunt together. And they're sitting in the same ground blind, and this beautiful 12-point buck walks out in front of their ground blind and turns perfectly sideways. The only problem is that buck's out there about 850, 900 yards. And the superintendent said, I normally wouldn't take a shot like this because of the distance, but that's just a beautiful 12-point buck. I want to give it a shot. So he squeezes off around. The bullet travels just a little bit to the left, misses the buck. The doesn't run off. So the project manager says, I'll give it a try. opportune moment. I'd hate to let it pass. So he takes his shot. Didn't allow for the wind. His bullet goes a little bit to the right. And the estimator, with absolutely no sarcasm in his voice, goes, "Great shooting, guys." I told you it was going to be bad. I warned you. All right, so I tell all my folks that there's 3 things to remember in pre-construction that will help you be fairly successful throughout the life cycle of the project. No square foot numbers. There are exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, do not give out square foot numbers. Be able to communicate what changes as the design evolves so that you can be a better partner to not only your design team, but to your owners as well. And have some dollars in there for something, even if it's wrong. And a lot of people kind of give me a weird look when I tell them that, and I say, you know, if you put $35 a square yard for carpet in your estimate, and the owner and the designer at the end of the day end up with $40 a square yard carpet, you only have to overcome $5. If you forgot carpet, you have to overcome $40. So, along those lines. I don't know if everybody in the room is familiar with all the phases of design. If you're just familiar with that end phase where you're hard bidding on construction documents, or if you're familiar with this, but I thought I'd walk back through this a little bit. A typical design phase goes something like this. There's a schematic design where there's still a lot of pushing and pulling on the design of the building itself, or the project. Square footages aren't set in place 100% yet. Very few construction materials have been selected. Most of the time it's schematic. You have no drawings on your MEP systems or structural systems. If you're lucky, if you've got a good design team, you'll get narratives to go along with that. But a lot of times with schematic, you're left with a floor plan, maybe an exterior elevation or two, and hopefully a site plan. That allows a schematic or conceptual estimator to go in and work and try to read several folks' minds on how this design is going to evolve, and I'll kind of get into that later because there's several other stakeholders that's involved in the design of this process. At design development, if you have a good design team, I like to say that those drawings are, if you weren't in construction, you might flip to a set of design development drawings and not realize that the drawings weren't done, because most of the time your square footage is set in place, your walls are set in place, you have very detailed information about your MEP systems and your structural systems, and the only thing that's left from design development to construction documents are the details that tell the craftsman how to put that work in place, or an attempt to tell them how to put that work in place. So then that leaves this gray area out here before schematic, we call conceptual estimating, which is just a fancy term for budgeting, really. Probably an architect come up with it. So you kind of have this, has anybody ever been just called up out of the blue, whether you're a subcontractor and just asked for, hey, how much is XYZ going for? And there's no other information. Pretty much everybody in the room, that happens often, right? And so it's kind of like this, the chicken or the egg, where an owner calls and says, I want to build a new building, how much is it going to cost me? And we say, well, how big of a building, what kind of building, and what kind of materials are you going to use? I don't know, that's why I'm asking you. I can't tell you how much it's going to cost, so I don't know any of that stuff. So you get this kind of never-ending cycle of questions, so somebody's got to make a decision. Hopefully the estimator does, and then that's where communication starts breaking down, inevitably. The life cycle of a design phase is usually about 6 to 8 months, depending on the project. Typical projects that I deal with on a daily basis anyway, are about 6 to 8 months. So if you don't know, if you've been asked to provide a preliminary budget or a conceptual estimate, and you don't know what the building size is, and you don't know what the building materials are going to be, hopefully you do set a building size as you're talking to your client when they ask you for an early budget. and you know that the design is not going to be done in 6 to 8 months, how in the world can you be expected to hit that price accurately? Well, it's kind of like all the boys sitting in the beer blind. A little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. As long as you get close, you're going to have a pretty good budget at the end. So we really miscommunicate all the time. It's not just in design, it's not just in construction, it's not just in estimating, it's in literally everyday life. So, you know the folks that did the keynote address, I've already forgot the name of the company, EPC? Yeah. Is there anybody from EPC here still? So, oddly enough, my sister-in-law works for them. She's their operations manager. And my wife's got an older sister, and this particular sister's younger than her. And their older sister's older by a few years and had kids young. And so I've got a nephew that's much older than my kids and all of his other cousins. And when he got married, I think it was 2 years ago, my sister-in-law, Amber, she said that she was going to help with the venue for his reception after his wedding. Now, my brother-in-law is a law enforcement officer. And so being that he's a law enforcement officer, he can get good pricing on the fireman's hall. So my sister-in-law told him, would you please go down and reserve fireman's hall for your nephew's reception? He said, yes, I would. So she went ahead and put all the invites together, put the address of where the reception was going to be, sent them out to all of our friends and family. And they were at my house, sitting around the fire pit one night, having a few adult beverages, and we got to talking about the wedding and the reception, and I said, I don't even know where it is. Where am I supposed to be on Saturday night? And my sister-in-law said, at the fireman's hall in Lisa. And my brother-in-law said, no. And she said, what are you talking about? And he said, it was booked. I told you that. She said, you sent me a text message that said the fireman's hall was booked. He said, yeah, it was booked. We couldn't have it that night. So they both said the exact same thing. It was the exact same thing, but they were both dead wrong of what the other one meant. And that happens to us even in estimating. So he wasn't, by the way, he was in trouble. And we had to do a Hail Mary on invites and call everybody that we knew. And then we also had to find a new place to have the reception. So that was a mess. No different than what happens whenever we get a budget wrong in construction. So, has anybody been through the Project Management Institute and talked about this formula for the lines of communication channels? Anybody done that? I have. You have? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought you held your hand up. So I have not been through that course, project management. I try to avoid project management since I did it for a good portion of my career. I try to avoid it like the plague these days. But they talk about a formula where you get too many people that are communicating with each other, and then communication actually breaks down. And so the formula is n times n minus 1 divided by 2, where n is the number of stakeholders. So actually what happens with that formula is, if you have 4 stakeholders, there's actually 6 different lines of communication that go on. This guy can communicate with this guy. This guy can communicate with this young lady. This young lady can communicate with this person. These two can communicate. These two can have a side conversation. And pretty soon, nobody knows exactly what's going on. It's like whispering in one person's ear, and they have to whisper in the next person's ear. You go around the room, by the time it gets back, it's a completely different story, right? Happens to us every single day. I believe that this directly reflects what happens in design. And that's a project management communication example, but I think that's what happens to us. Let's see, I see you're an electrical contractor, right? How many people affect the price of that light fixture up there? Okay. Would it be correct to say that the owner affects the light fixture? The architect, the engineer, and maybe an interior designer. Everybody agree with that? Oh yeah, we're going to get to them here in a minute. We're not done. How about a building inspector? Maybe we're not talking about the beautiful chandelier hanging above us. Maybe we're talking about an exit sign over the door that's still a light fixture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Now what happens most of the time, there are exceptions to the rule, what happens when those final construction documents are done? How many manufacturers do they usually put on a light fixture schedule? Or a carpet schedule, or a room finish schedule, or a rooftop unit schedule? 3? Let's just say 3.
Or equal.
Or equal, yeah. So we're going to work with a minimum of 3 for this one, right? Okay, so how does that material get to the end user or the subcontractor? How many people have to touch it then? In the electrical world, and I found this to be true in several other markets, but you usually have the factory, the manufacturer's rep, who gives the pricing to the supply house, and the supply house who gives the pricing to the electrical contractor, times 3 for everybody. So, manufacturer, supply house, electrical contractor, electrical contractor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 people at a minimum affect the light.
We forgot the lighting rep.
Oh yeah, lighting rep.
And the shipper.
Got 3 of those guys too.
And the shipper.
And the shipping company, and it goes on and on and on. Okay, so at any given time during the year or the month, these guys have all got different desires about their overheads and their operating expenses. These change, don't they? They don't bid the same price every day, the same markup every day. You guys don't put the same price on a project when your manpower is full and you don't need more work and you look at the schedule, it starts immediately, you jack that price up. And then on top of that, it takes 6 to 8 months to design. So you've got to be able to articulate back to your designers and your owners what you had in there the day that you picked it, right, wrong, or indifferent. When that changes and you're called to the table on why it changed, you have to be able to communicate to them, and you have to be able to let your design partners and your owners understand this process, because they don't do construction every day, so they're just not going to get it, and it's going to cause a lot of hurt feelings. It's going to put you in a lot of uncomfortable situations, which unfortunately I've been in a lot of them. So, I was thinking about putting this PowerPoint together, and I actually went way back to the first example of this that I could think of before I worked for Naples. It was back whenever I was an electrical contractor. I think I was bidding to Ron Burke's company at the time. It was design build, and it was a bastardized version of design build, where all you get is a floor plan, and then the electrical contractors and the mechanical contractors and the plumbers have to come up with a design, and then the general contractors go with the guy who's the cheapest, even though they don't have a clue what he designed and if it's a good design. But that's how it worked. And so I did it. And there was a note. And on the large open office area where all the cubicles were, it said, industrial indirect lighting. Now I was fresh out of the field in my electrical career. I had just started project management and estimating. And I'll be honest with you, I was so green to this, I didn't know what indirect meant. So I went and asked my boss, what does indirect lighting mean? And he said, well, it's lights that kind of shine up, not direct down on the floor. Okay. Well, I didn't communicate to my boss that I was asking about industrial indirect lighting for an estimate. I didn't say that to him. I I just asked him, what's in direct lighting? I mean, we don't want to look foolish in front of our bosses, right? So I didn't give him the full story. I didn't communicate that well. So at the end of the day, here's what the client wanted. The client wanted this in his nice big cubicle office when he said industrial uplighting, something that looked futuristic and cool. And you know what I did? Because I gotta be low. I gotta be the low bidder. I priced this, and I said, well, hang it like this. How do you think that went over? But you know what happened was the general contractor took my number, and he got the project too, because he's got the low electrical number. I was the low bidder. Looks like I got a slide out of order too. Here we go. This was supposed to be after that one. I was the low bid. I was under contract, and I hadn't communicated effectively with my boss, and I hadn't communicated effectively to the folks that I had been to, and now I got not only myself in trouble, but I got a few other people in trouble as well, because this was a fight to get through this. And we didn't lose money on the job, but we didn't make a dime on the job because of this. We ended up compromising, going with a different light fixture, because there was no way that they were going with this in their new office in the middle of Overland Park, or they weren't having it. Yet there really wasn't anything on their contract documents to tie me to anything else. Poor communication. Okay, my first budget update with Naples, I couldn't communicate what had changed. Now, you know, I don't know what happened with my boss at the time. I don't know if he assumed because I had several years in estimating already as an electrical subcontractor that I automatically knew this, or if he was just busy and had other things going on, or if he was just sadistic and wanted to see me, you know, struggle. But he didn't tell me to be able to communicate what changed in an estimate. And unfortunately, he had ran the schematic estimate for a particular project and passed it off to me at design development. So I finished up my first ever design development estimate, and I'm so happy with myself because I've only been an electrical contractor for 10 years, and now I'm estimating entire buildings. And I just finished my first ED estimate, and we're over budget. And I'm going to go in there and I'm going to tell those architects that they're over budget and that they've ruined this project already if they don't ship it. And so I walked into my meeting with my estimate in front of the owner and in front of the architects, and I threw my budget down on the table and I said, we're over budget, we got to cut scope. And they said, well, wait a minute. When your boss gave us the schematic estimate, we were on budget. So, and we haven't asked for anything different from the architects. We didn't ask them to change anything or increase building size or nothing. Why are we over budget now? And I had nothing. I had absolutely nothing. I sat there across from the table from him, and I did not know what to say at all. And I felt about that tall. Instead of the guy that was going to set the architect straight. I absolutely failed at my job. He's laughing and nodding his head. Have you been there too? Or were you going to sleep? Has anybody else ever been in that situation? Yeah. Kind of. So what you're saying is just me. Okay, I want to tell you about another one. I'm showing you some things that greatly affected budget to the tune of a lot of dollars. Almost delayed projects and left some pretty unhappy clients in their wake. For what I do in my business, if I could create every budget for all of my clients, it would be much easier for me. The reality is almost 9 times out of 10, I'm given a project that already has a budget that somebody else created. So I have to try to recreate that number because I don't like working with square foot numbers. For that reason, I can't communicate when things change. So I was working with an architectural firm. And by the way, I do a lot of public work, so I'm not going to talk about names of architectural firms. I'm not going to talk about names of my clients because I think this is going on YouTube later today. So, I had worked with an architect on another job, several other jobs, and we were always repricing different levels of renovation. Light renovation, medium renovation, heavy renovation. And what's the deal about you do the same thing over and over again, expecting something different to happen is insanity. I decided that I was actually going to create basically an assembly of what these renovations are in my estimating software, so that all I had to do was just put a square foot number in, and it kicks out my line item estimate for me. Save time, I'm getting lean. So I worked with the architect, and I said, in your architectural world, help me understand what you guys mean when you say light renovation and medium renovation. And she and I went through and we worked out scopes, and it was great because I had her input, she had my input on pricing. And the particular job that we did that exercise on, we didn't get. I think the voters that failed to pass the bond, it was for school, so we didn't get it. But another opportunity came up, and she was the architect hired before us, was the architect on the job. It was up to her firm. The owner asked her to set their preliminary budget for the project during their master plan process. And thankfully, she called me up and she said, Preston, I got another project where we're going to have very, very similar scope of work to the last one that we worked on. I'm going to have different levels of renovation. Can I use those numbers? And I said, yeah, sure can. And that's all we said. I didn't ask her if she was 100% certain that that was what they were going to do. And when I got the job, the description said light to medium renovation and right sizing of classrooms, which was never discussed on the phone with me and the architect. Right sizing classrooms means tearing out all of the walls because they're not big enough and completely redoing all of the classrooms in the entire school. 250,000 square foot. And oh, by the way, we're doing additions to the school too, so the electrical and mechanical systems are no longer sufficient to handle it, and we've got to upgrade all of those as well. I delivered the first budget to the owner, and we were over budget big time. And he said, what changed? And I said, well, the level of renovation changed. I said, you said light to medium, medium to whatever, and it's a full heavy remodel. And he said, no. He said, that was in the narrative that you guys submitted on. And I go, but that wasn't my price. And you know what the architect said? I called you, and we talked about this. Which we clearly didn't talk about it well enough. So anyway, I'm on the hook. I did it. I gotta take one for the team. I verified the architect's numbers. I went and I interviewed for the job. I was awarded the job. And now I'm the guy that's telling the owner that he can't afford what he wants. But in this situation, I was a little bit luckier because I was able to communicate what changed. Even though they didn't like it, I could still tell them what was going on in terms of dollars. So the budget was built like this. They took a 250,000 square foot school, they divided it in half, and they said about half of the school is going to be light renovation, $28.85 a square foot, and the other half is going to be medium renovation, $78.52 a square foot. Now there's other, like I said, there's other things going on here, but this is the renovation specifically. Budget for that portion of the work was $13,420,000. Heavy renovation, tearing out walls, new mechanical, new electrical, runs us almost $172 a square foot for 250,000 square feet. Does anybody got a calculator? 42 million, almost 43 million. A single change of a sentence sold to the voters who voted to increase their taxes to pay for this, to have their classrooms right-sized. Day one, after schematic design, is $30 million over budget. Because we didn't communicate very well. Same project. We start working on how we're going to figure out our $30 million problem. We eventually did it. I will tell you that the owner did come up with some other funding. So we didn't get all the way there, but we did eventually get it. But Once we got past that first great big problem, we had another conversation, same architect. What'd you have in there for marker boards? Again, this is at a schematic level. You don't have information on marker boards on the drawings. You're lucky to have a correct floor plan. They said it's really important to the teachers that they have good marker boards. We've already talked to them about this. And I said, I've got 190 classrooms. I've got 2 marker boards that are 4 foot by 8 foot long in each classroom. And right now I'm budgeting them at $19 a square foot installed. Installed is a key word that the architects didn't hear. And the number 2 and the dimensions are key things that the architects did not hear. Apparently I was an ineffective communicator because I miscommunicated, because they went back to the teachers and they said, yep, we got money for marker boards in here. 190 classrooms, let's wrap the room all the way around the wall. Marker boards everywhere. Teacher can write on whatever wall she wants to. The kids can come up and write on it. And by the way, we picked out this really cool marker board. We heard you say the number $19 a square foot, and we found a wall talker magnetic marker board that does all kinds of cool stuff, and it's $19 a square foot, right in our budget. $1,771,560 over budget on one line item, marker boards. I'm not making this stuff up. These are real conversations I've had. These are real situations I've been in. And also frame this too, guys, on what we're dealing with here. This isn't a data center. This is a school district that doesn't have a large budget. They had to go out and ask their taxpayers to pass a bond to raise taxes to pay for this. And now I'm the guy that's telling them that they can't have what they want. These folks don't do construction projects every day. They're lucky to do one construction project in their career most of the time. Especially when you get, well, not here within the metro area or other metro areas, but when you get out in the rural school districts, which that's kind of what this one was, construction just doesn't happen very often. I said earlier that there was 3 things that you needed to remember to be a good pre-constructor or a good budgeter. I said no square foot numbers. And I'm going to tell you why they're bad. Excuse me. I understand that it's an industry standard to use square foot numbers. I get it. I know that there's not a lot of architectural firms that have in-house estimators. That's just not the nature of the beast. I understand that a lot of times they go all the way through their design life cycle and they take a project out to hard bid, and the only information they have is that lump sum number that they turn into a square foot number. I totally get it. I understand that that's just how it's done. It's how it's been done for a long time. I almost always refuse to do it unless I'm very clear about a disclaimer that it is usually based off of time. Somebody comes up and says, I got to know right now, how much is this going to cost? And I don't have any time to sit down and put an estimate together. So I will do budget numbers that way, but very rarely. So again, this is another example. I picked a school because that seems to be the one that we have the most budget problems with. This is another example where an architect did a square foot number that I was given at a small rural school. The architect put together an opinion of probable cost to the owner, and he gave him a swing. And he said, and so now this was a large project. There was a bunch of other moving parts and pieces here. That's a whole different story. But this guy right here, particularly, was the main offender. It was a new early childhood center, which we used to call kindergarten. Now they're early childhood centers for little guys. 20,000 square foot, and a probable cost range of $185 to $200 a square foot. Now this project is not around here locally. So we were asked to respond to a request for qualifications and a request for pricing, which request for pricing was just limited to our general conditions and our fees. It had nothing to do with the actual project costs. So we were asked to respond to this. Me being the budget number pre-com guy, I immediately red flagged this. And I said, the last thing I built that was $200 a square foot was a square pre-engineered metal gymnasium building. The other construction costs that we're seeing they're over $200 a square foot, so I'm concerned about this $200 a square foot number. And I thought to myself, well, I don't work in that market. Maybe it's a different market than the folks that are out there along I-70 out there in western Kansas. Those are the numbers that I'm used to seeing. I'm used to seeing the numbers here in the local Kansas City market, but I've never really worked down there before. Well, Nabholz has other offices. This is down in southern Missouri. And so I called up a guy from our Rogers office, Rogers, Arkansas. He's my counterpart down there. I'm still not saying names, even the names of our own guys, because this guy knows some of our people. Oh, by the way, before I get to that, I want to tell you that they actually published this to the voters too. I mean, it was actually in their bond language. Instead of just saying an early childhood center, they actually said that it was 20,000 square foot with a price tag of $4 million in the middle of their entire budget. They called that one out for us. So I called my buddy in Arkansas and I said, can I build an early childhood center in southern Missouri for $200 a square foot? And he said, yep, all day long. Now, I can only imagine that maybe this is what he was thinking about. I'm sorry if there's anybody from Arkansas in the room. I was having an Arkansas joke. I don't really mean that. I like those guys. But he told me all day long. And we talked it through on the phone, and he said it's probably adequate if you're pulling from a different subcontractor market than what you normally see. And again, like I said, our experience in this market was minimal, never worked down there before. And so we went to the interview. And in the middle of the interview, the architect looked at me and she said, what do you think of our budget? Well, I'm not going to tell them that I think their budget is screwed up in the middle of an interview, because that's pretty much going to guarantee that I'm not going to get the job, right? So I said, you know, I think it's tight, but I said, I think we can work with it. So I think it's doable. I'm really on the spot in the middle of the interview. So we kind of started to envision, and no drawings, no concept renderings, just 20,000 square foot. And so I'm thinking maybe if we've got a rectangular shaped building with a low pitch roof and, maybe like a residential deal here and some mats, and maybe we can do this for $200 a square foot. I'm already value engineering this thing in my mind. And then, when the bond was approved, I saw our first rendering of the Early Childhood Center. Yeah, whoops. And so, me and my team started our first estimate on it. And our very first estimate, we actually came out, I don't remember what the numbers are, but I do know that we were north of $360 a square foot. And we delivered that. When we had some conversations with the design team, what did you guys think $200 a square foot looked like? And unfortunately, they didn't know either. They didn't know. I said, well, the last thing that we built that was $200 a square foot was a warehouse. I said, same as me. Square with nothing in it. It's empty. There's no interior walls. It's a square box. This is a rectangular building that actually curves in a couple of places. And so went to the first budget review, and it became a very, very caustic environment because the architects didn't agree with us. They said, we don't agree with that. We think your estimate is incorrect, inaccurate. And the owner didn't know who to believe. And the owner asked again, well, what changed? You came to the interview, my architect, he said, my architect, like I'm not on his team too, my architect asked you in the interview what you thought of our budget, and you said it was okay. And now you're telling me that we went from $200 a square foot to over $350 a square foot. What changed? And I couldn't tell him, because $200 a square foot was based off of who knows what. apparently it was based off of a square warehouse, which is nothing like what met the definition of an early childhood center. All we could tell them was what we thought the cost. The architect didn't agree. The owner didn't know who to believe. The owner actually made a comment about, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job over this. I mean, that's the kind of environment that I was dealing in over a square foot number. So that's why we don't do square foot numbers if we can possibly avoid them. On bid day, the market responded and confirmed our numbers, $350 a square foot. And at bid day, somebody in the room with me, I won't tell you if it was the design team or the owner, said, "Boy, you guys really missed this one." And I can only imagine that my face looked like my buddy Chris Rock here when they made that comment, because I've been telling them since day one it was north of $350 a square foot, but nobody wanted to believe us. All right. I'm running way ahead of schedule. I'll just be real honest with everybody in the room. I never rehearsed this. I just put some slides together, so I wasn't sure exactly how long it was going to be, but you know what? I think it's happy hour next, right? So, program budgets. So there are construction dollars that are associated with just the construction, the building materials, your general contractors, GCs and fees and overheads. But then typically, if you're building a building that's coming out of the ground, the owner's going to have several other costs that are associated that they're going to have to pay for. And it's different from project to project. It may be the purchase of the land itself, so they can build a new building on. It's not my construction cost to purchase that land, but the owner is going to have to pay for it. They may want to furnish their new buildings. By the time we get done with contract negotiation, all the FF&E, the fixtures, furniture, and equipment, that's typically, in most contracts, that's on the owner and not on us. So they got to buy those things as well. We recommend that they keep a little bit of contingency for themselves sometimes, and then they also have to pay their design team if it's not a design-build situation. If it's an architect that they're hiring direct, they have to pay for those. So I never used to track program budgets. I always thought the only thing I had to worry about was construction costs. Until I did a project that nobody tracked program budget, and the owner had never done a construction project before, and didn't see all these other costs coming out of left field. And unfortunately, again, going back to communication, I never raised my hand. I always knew what the budget was, and it said, it literally said construction budget, $2.5 million for an addition. $2.5 million sounds like a lot until you're over budget. And then there's more opportunity for value engineering in a larger project when you get up at multi-millions than there are in a project with only a couple million. There's just not as many opportunities for value engineering. So anyway, I let the entire design phase play out until design development. Early budgets, schematic design. Get to design development, we're ready to go. We're ready to move into construction documents, take this baby out to bid, and start building. And I thought, I'm just going to go ahead and ask if the owner has got his money in place for the total program budget. And so I asked him, I said, now this is the construction budget. I said, we were going through it line by line. I had a bunch of line items, again, not just a square foot number, and I said, so you have secured the funding to pay for your architects and to pay for all your fixtures and furniture and equipment and your new telephone system and all that stuff is not in my contract, right? And it was a deer in the headlight look. The owner didn't have a clue that he was going to have, that all of those other things that he had to buy were not in my budget. I don't know where the communication breakdown was, if he saw it in our contract on what we were contractually obligated and didn't understand it, or if he saw it and thought maybe that the architects were going to get it. I don't know what it was, but anyway, massive redesign, okay? $2.5 million, and now I got to go find 25%, approximately 25%, to pay A&E fees, fixtures, furniture, and equipment, and a new phone system. So we took it all the way back to concept again. Well, I'd say light schematic. We took it back to literally bubble drawings on a sheet of paper redesigning rooms, shrinking square footage, changing building materials, and very little information to work with, and I'm pricing what I think. Again, I mean, it's what we talked about, how many people here affect the light fixtures. So I'm throwing out numbers, what new light fixtures are going to cost based off of no information. And then the other thing that I did wrong was I let them go. So we went through the design phase, the design development. We were so far over budget because we'd not communicated the program budget. I let them go back to concept, and then I let them go to construction drawings without ever stopping and pressing them again. Why? Because of schedule. We got to be into our new building in April, whatever the month was. You know, we don't have time to sit and let you estimate it. We got to go. We got to draw these drawings. So I let them go from concept to construction drawings without ever checking their budget again. And we took it out to bid, and we got the exact same result, $2.5 million. So that wasn't fun. That wasn't fun to be a part of either. And it was all just because I didn't ask the question. I knew that the owner needed to have that. I knew that the owner hadn't done other construction projects, that this may be their only construction project, and I didn't communicate to them. The fireman's hall was booked. Anybody got any questions for me? I've got several other lessons learned myself that I didn't put in the slideshow, and I realize that I'm running very early. We're at the 45-minute mark. So I'll open it up to question and answers if there's anything you guys want to know, or something about these projects that I can't share with you. Like I said, I don't really feel like sharing names and architectural firms. So next time you get a phone call and somebody asks, hey, how much is this thing going to cost, and they don't give you any other information, try to remember some of the things that I've messed up and go about your answer differently. All right, no other questions? Yes, sir.
So you mentioned that you did electrical for 11 years?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So can you tell me a little bit about just how wildly different your life is as a general contractor or CM as opposed to a subcontractor? Because I've just seen the one side.
Gotcha. So Dirk asked, what's the difference between coming from the subcontracting side to going to the general contracting side? They both have their advantages and disadvantages. What I like about the general contracting side is, and maybe this is just me personally, because like I said, I felt like I got a little stale with electrical contracting, is I just get to learn a lot more about a lot of other stuff. You know, I didn't used to know what crickets on a roof were. Thought it was a bug. You know, whenever I came over to this side, I found out crickets were things on the roof that keep the water running in the right direction. So it's just a whole new opportunity to learn a lot more information. I will say, though, that coming as a former subcontractor, it's given me some good perspective to the arguments that I hear at the coffee pot with my guys, the Naples guys, talking about how the subcontractors did this on the job site, and it just infuriated them. And I'm like, well, hold up, guys. Let me tell you why they did that. You know, so I've been able to bring a little bit of value to the table. Not a whole lot. Apparently, I can't estimate. You know, I think, and don't get me wrong, there's great general contractors out there, and there's bad general contractors out there, and it's the same thing with subs, but I also understand from a general contractor side the subs that don't perform well, and the tailspin that sends us in from a general contractor point of view. And again, most of those things are just, once again, communication. Didn't understand the schedule, didn't understand what was expected out of them, didn't read the drawings well enough, and bid what they wanted to bid. So that's one thing that I've experienced as well.